Well, it's hard to follow that, but we'll make a try. Talking about freedom comes in many different forms. And when I was growing up, there were a lot of people who were, let's say, not understanding about racial differences. And a lot of people said, it's impossible, you can't do certain things. But my mother was not one of those people. You talk about women who are strong. My mother came from a large rural family in Tennessee, shifted from home to home, less than a third grade education, got married when she was 13. They ended up in Detroit. She discovered that my father was a bigamist. They were divorced. And there she had the job of trying to raise two young sons by herself. But she believed true freedom comes with education. And she pushed and pushed for education. I was a terrible student, by the way. But she prayed for wisdom, and God gave it to her. That wisdom was to turn off the TV and make sure we read books. And I got to the point where I actually liked reading, because between the covers of those books, even though we were very poor, I could read about all kinds of things, about all kinds of very successful people, including Frederick Douglass, who Cory Booker was just talking about. And it freed me, it freed my imagination to really start thinking about what I could do and not what I couldn't do. And I went from an E student to an A student. And it changed the course of my life in a very dramatic way. But that was done by a mother who many people criticized. And they said, you can't make boys stay in the house and read books. They'll grow up and they'll hate you. And I used to overhear them, and I would say, Mother, you know they're right. But we still had to do it anyway. And I think she got the last laugh, because one son became a brain surgeon and the other became a rocket scientist. So I think maybe she might have known what she was talking about, and that courage was leading to a special place. But, you know, so many people thought about this country in its beginnings that freedom was impossible. We were fighting against the British Army, the most powerful military force on earth, and it looked impossible. But that determination and that courage and that faith led to our freedom. But then, not too many years after that, we were involved in another war with the same power, the War of 1812. And there we came to the last battle. The British had burned down the White House and several parts of Washington, D.C. It was looking pretty grim. They sailed up to the Chesapeake Bay, came up on Fort McHenry in Baltimore, and they said, take down that flag. There was a big American flag flying. And General Armistead said, I'm not taking that flag down. They said, we will destroy you if you don't take it down. All night long, bombs bursting in air. It was a terrible battle. Francis Scott Key was on that ship. He was very discouraged about the fledgling country. But as the sun began to rise and the dust began to clear, he saw the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The flag was still there. It was still waving. And that was the beginning of the end of the War of 1812. We won that battle. The British eventually became our friends. But that's what courage, faith, and determination can do, no matter what the odds look like. And, you know, I know many Iranians. I've worked with many Iranians, mostly in academic settings, extremely smart people. When I was a junior resident at Johns Hopkins in neurosurgery, our chief resident, Bijan Arabi, was Iranian. He was one of the most fantastic surgeons ever. I learned a lot from him. But what I've learned from all of those Iranian people that I've known is they're just like us in America. They like and they want peace and freedom. And today they're facing a brutal regime. But it didn't start with this regime. It actually started way back in the 60s and 70s with the Shah of Iran, who seemed to be doing a lot of great things for them economically, brought automobiles back, finances increased, built up the oil empire. But then he started nationalizing everything, which sometimes is justified, but what was not justified is the brutality upon his enemies. And I think it was that brutal regime which got people accustomed to the kind of tyranny that subsequently found itself in Iran. And the people don't like it. And they're willing to fight, but they probably could use some help. And we can ignore what's going on in Iran, say it's not our problem. But you have to recognize that if you ignore tyranny, it spreads. And eventually, it will catch up with you. So when we tolerate tyranny anywhere, we're paving the way for tyranny in our own backyard. And it's something that we have to remember. And we have to realize that working together makes all the difference. And I'll end with another conjoined twin story. There was a set of conjoined twins from Europe, and they were joined at the top of the head. And I said, you know, I've done a number of these, and I'm at the #1 neurosurgery department in the world at Johns Hopkins. I said, we've got people here who are the best there are with vascular neurosurgery, with skull-based neurosurgery, with tumor neurosurgery, with all kinds of parts. Why should I do that whole operation? I recruited 17 other neurosurgeons. We had a team of 18 and scheduled the surgery in such a way that when we got to the part where they were the expert in the world, we would shift to teams. We were literally 10 hours ahead of schedule. That's what happens when you don't worry about who gets the credit, but you understand what the goal is. And our goal right now is freedom for the Iranian people. Thank you very much.